Hi, my name is Corey Simmons, and this is a tutorial for Tuts Plus. I just wanted to show you a new framework I built called the Jeet framework. It's a lightweight, responsive framework that gets away from presentational classes and focuses on separating markup from style in a semantic way, kind of like it was intended whenever external style sheets came out. And then somehow we slipped back into using a lot of presentational classes, which really resemble inline styling to me and clutter up your markup and therefore the structure of your page. Um, but I just wanted to show you right off the bat just an example of two websites, one made with Jeet and the other made with Bootstrap, that are very similar in their layout. So you got a logo up here, your navigation up here, a left column and a right column. Same with the Bootstrap demo. And this is Bootstrap's responsive approach. And what they do, okay, so if we start wiggling our viewport around, you can see if we shrink it, they're using something called the Goldilocks approach, where it gives you these big margins. Oops. And as you shrink it down again, it goes to another size. And it just keeps doing that until eventually it stacks. Goldilocks is pretty good, but after seeing some websites made with Foundation, I realized that one breakpoint was the best route for making responsive sites. It's a lot less work, and it's cleaner. It makes more use of screen space, especially if you're on a tablet or something like that. At this size, you're wasting a lot of real estate. So Jeet, adheres to that fluid principle that everything should be in percentage. So, as you shrink down with Jeet, it gets smaller and smaller while leaving some padding on the sides so that your content's not butting up against the edges. Of course, you can get rid of that. And once you get to the breakpoint in it, it switches down. Now, if you look at an Internet Explorer 10, let's minimize Chrome, you can see that it does the same thing, like you'd expect. It looks fine. Same with Bootstrap. But if you start going down browsers, Internet Explorer 9 still works. Jeet still works. But in Bootstrap and Internet Explorer 8, it just seems like it stops working, like it stops responding to media requests. And that's Internet Explorer 8 is still used by about 11% of people according to that global stat counter website. But with Jeet, go down to Internet Explorer 8, it pops up the outdated browser thing, the Chrome frame from HTML5 boilerplate. And as you go down further and further, it's still responsive. There's a breakpoint and everything. You can click on that to get rid of it if somebody can't upgrade their browser and they don't want to be bothered by it. And in Internet Explorer 7, same story, it's a little bit worse. Now here's the cool part. In Jeet, Internet Explorer 7 supported. It's like 1% of users, but it's still cool. So as we keep shrinking down, it stacks. Alright, so here's what Jeet's markup looks like. Just to give you an overview of kind of what the code looks like. We'll go into this more in depth here in a second, but it's very semantic and clean. And not just because we're using HTML5 tags. We could certainly use those in Bootstrap, but you don't need like any of those presentational classes. So it's very easy to quickly skim over your code and see the structure of the website, which is good. And with Bootstrap, you have like a lot of presentational classes, like all this stuff, and there's nothing wrong, like technically wrong, with using IDs and presentational classes, but this is just it's a lot more typing, it's a lot more clutter, and just for this tiny layout demo, Bootstrap's using 650 characters, whereas we're using 440. So you can see how if you had a very big website, it would really start to affect things. Looking at Bootstrap CSS, it's this isn't minified, but you can get a feel for just how much stuff is in it, and it's like 130,000 characters, and then to make it responsive, it's about 20,000. So you're looking at like 150,000 characters, and most of that's not going to be used, so you're just loading it for no reason. With Jeet, the compiled CSS is that big and about 5,000 characters. So Bootstrap 150,000, Jeet 5,000. So how do we get these layouts? How do we make a layout with Jeet? With Bootstrap, we had to specify those presentational classes. So to get rid of the presentational classes, you use a preprocessor, and we're using Stylus because I really like Stylus's syntax. It's very clean and very much like Python. It's indentation based. You can get rid of all kinds of characters. So that's how we get rid of all these presentational classes. We move them over into our style, and as a result, we have much more control over what gets put into our how elements are styled, and it's almost like the MVC architecture, where you separate certain things. It's a lot easier to maintain code if the structure and the style is broken up. So that's a quick overview of what Jeet is and how it compares to other frameworks. And now let's go more in depth. Getting started with Jeet is incredibly simple. First, go to jeetframework.com, click on installation, and then follow the steps. First, you have to install Node.js, which is awesome, and I hope everybody starts using Node, but it's besides the point. You pick the installer you want, like for whatever system you're on, install it. Once you've ran through the installer, come back here, open up your terminal, and then paste this command to install Stylus to your system. It says Node Package Manager install Stylus, and that G flag says globally. So we'll do that. And now we can use Stylus anywhere on our computer we want, in any project, anytime we want. We install nib, and nib, if you've ever used Compass for Sass, is Stylus's Compass. It's a collection of CSS mixins that lets you do cool things like define gradients, like so, which is a lot nicer than having to memorize all this stuff and how all the different browsers do it. It also gets rid of things like browser prefixes. So for instance, border radius, you just type in like border radius 5 pixels and it'll add all the prefixes for you automatically. It does a whole slew of other things, but those are really the only two things that I use it for. Feel free to use everything, but for now I'll just grab that, copy that, paste it in our terminal. And now we've installed nib globally, so we can use stylus and nib globally. Now we need to grab a copy of Jeet, so let's click on that link. It takes us to the GitHub page. You can either clone it. I'm not a huge fan of cloning things I'm just grabbing to test out and stuff, so there's also a zip. And grab the zip, open it up, and there's all this stuff's just GitHub junk, but the web folder and the design folder are where the actual Jeet framework lives. So we'll grab both of those and drag them to our project folder. Ignore the screencast folder. That's for this. So in our we put our Jeet project inside of our local host, either WAMP or XAMPP, or if you're using Python, like a simple HTTP server. But we do that because Jeet loads some JavaScript for Internet Explorer, and Internet Explorer has some security measures that won't let you run JavaScript, certain JavaScript stuff from a file. But if you run it through localhost, then it appears to Internet Explorer like it's an actual web page, so it will load those things. So if you don't put it on localhost, then you're probably going to get some errors in Internet Explorer like 8 and 7 particularly. So keep that in mind if it's acting funny on those. So if we go back to our Jeet folder, our project folder, in the design folder, this is kind of just where I put like logos and any graphics and save my PSDs and things like that. But it comes with a grid that will take forever to load. But so let's go look at the rest of the stuff. Oh, there it is. Okay, so if we zoom in on the grid, Control plus, then we can see it's a pretty big grid. And we can disable all the rows. We can disable all the columns. We can disable the whole grid. And if we look at columns, Jeet starts off as a 24 column grid system. So these are all the factors of 24. So if you're using 12 columns, or you need that, then there you go. Or 8, or 6, 4. You get the idea. But using this, it's very easy to quickly mock things up. If you go to Edit, Preferences, and put a grid line every 30 pixels with 6 subdivisions, then if you hit Control semicolon, you can enable, disable, and if you hit Control single quote, then you can get these 5 pixel blocks to work with. So the grid system itself is huge, but there's a lot of accuracy in it and precision. And like I said, it allows you to quickly mock things up. And for instance, snapping's on, it's even easier. Oops. Just disable the grid, and there's a draft, kind of like a wireframe to work with. But yeah, that's generally what it is. You can get very specific with this and like very detailed with your mockups, and Jeet accepts them pretty well. one thing to keep in mind is it's a lot easier whenever you're doing fluid design if you have objects instead of like heavily detailed things. It's very nice like if you have like isolated objects to work with, and that's just something that's like universal in fluid design. So the more you adhere to that principle, the faster your sites are going to get developed responsively. So let's go ahead and close out of the grid that it comes with and actually look at the framework itself. So open up the web folder, and this is kind of where Jeet lives. If we open up Sublime Text 2, then we can see that Jeet uses a lot of HTML5 boilerplate. All this stuff up here is all HTML5 boilerplate. There's only a few things that Jeet adds to this. One of them is Selectivizer, which is a Internet Explorer 8 and 7.6 polyfill for CSS3 selectors, like and, last child, things like that. And then we also use Respond.js, which makes it responsive in Internet Explorer, like old versions of Internet Explorer. It tosses up this Chrome frame to basically bug people with old versions of Internet Explorer to upgrade their browser. And then it uses jQuery, and I added the protocol to it. Like nowadays, whenever you go to grab it, it doesn't have the protocol, but a lot of people don't understand whenever they try to load their HTML file as a file, and it doesn't load jQuery. So I added the HTTP protocol. I figure people that know how to use HTTPS will know to get rid of it when it's appropriate. I also added a placeholder.js, which basically means that we don't have to worry about labels and all that stuff anymore. We don't have to write JavaScript just to like let people click on input fields and have default text in it that disappears and reappears. Placeholder is a great little HTML5 tag, and so now it works in all browsers. And if they click on Chrome frame, it'll slide it up really fast to get it out of their way. So here's where most of your markup will go. The rest of the stuff you can pretty much ignore. All of your markup will go in here, and it's all very clean markup, like you saw earlier. So let's go to in the JS folder. There's a vendor folder which has just some of the stuff you've already seen. The box sizing polyfill is for Internet Explorer 7, so the box sizing works with it. And if we open up CSS folder, we can see style, and this is where 99% of your work will be done. Like I said, markup is so easy. You can usually do it in 1 or 2 lines of like an entire layout, entire website, and 1 or 2 long lines of Emmet, which is the Zen coding, which is the Zen coding 2.0 basically. And so 99% of your work will be done here in this style file. So first it imports the framework itself, which the framework, if we go into Jeet and look at framework, it's a reset. The normalized reset, which uses the old version, which supports Internet Explorer 7. And then uses nib gradients and vendor. Like I said, if there's anything else on the nib site that you saw that you really like and you wanted to use, go ahead and just add it underneath there. And then it imports Jeet settings, which in the settings file. Jeet allows you to change the column width, gutter width, and the number of columns, which is pretty nice. Being able to specify the number of columns is very nice, and like you can use anything. So I use 24 simply because there are so many factors of 24, and it's very easy to visualize, you know, where certain columns are going to go. If 24 is too complicated for you, you can switch it down to 12, or you know, you can switch it to anything you want. Like if you want there to be 100 columns, that's fine. If you find that's easier, then yeah, do that. But like I said, 24 is pretty nice for my purposes. The max width is the center viewport, if we, hang on one second. Okay, you see how this box is centered and there's margins on each side? This containing element, well, there's not a containing element, but each of these elements that are centered are 1,410 pixels wide. And so that's what the max width means. Once you start shrinking down your viewport, once it hits that 1410, then it turns into 100%. So that's how max width works. Max width padding is, once you get to the edge, there's a little bit of padding there. You can, if you actually do want like a dashboard or like an admin type site, and you want your site to actually push up against the edges, like with buttons up against the edges and things like that, then just turn this to 0. Oh, well, it's not. But just turn it to 0 and then it'll work. If you want more padding, increase it. If you don't have a lot of content on your site, you might not want the max width to be that big, but I start that off as a default because I have a huge monitor and I hate it whenever there's a lot of real estate just wasted, so I like to have a big giant content area starting off with. And there's a couple typography settings: link color, base font size, pretty self-explanatory, and yeah, that's it. So if we go back into Framework just to kind of browse it, see what's going on, it applies box sizing to everything. It applies a max width of 100% to images, video, audio, and what that does is it makes sure that once you start shrinking down, like that image, you see how it's shrinking. That's how max width works with images, and they're a containing element. And then we go into some semantic grid system stuff. Like I said, Jeet is a collection of several front-end resources. One of those resources is Semantic Grid System that's been heavily tweaked to do what I want it to do accurately. But yeah, Semantic Grid System was one of the motivating factors of making this, and I can't give enough credit to the creator of that. Then we have a plugin for Clearfix, or a mixin for Clearfix, I'm sorry. Here we have a column mixin, which if you just say column is X number, the first parameter is X, which says the number of columns you want it to span. Second parameter is center, whether or not you want the column to be centered. And if it's the last thing, then you would specify an L, so that if last child doesn't pick up that it's the actual last child for some reason or another, or if you want to do something custom where there's not a margin right applied to it, then the last parameter, the third parameter, passes L. Span, it gets rid of the margins between these. So a lot of times you'll have navigation bars that you don't want a margin between, you don't want a gap between. You just want them to butt up against each other to have like that there's two little faint lines between them. And that's what span does. It gets rid of that margin between items. Again, it has a centering thing. So if the second parameter you pass to it is C, then it'll center it. It has an offset function, which you saw right here. This navigation element right here has been offsetted, which basically just gives it a big margin left, pushes it over to the right. It has a center mixin, which allows you to pass max width on the fly. So you can have multiple max widths that are centered instead of just that one in settings. You can set it as many times as you want. Typically, I don't use these parameters. Same thing with the max width padding, but typically I don't use these parameters, and I just pass center to center these elements. And what it does is it just applies that max width that was in our settings to the width, and gives it a margin left and right of auto. And then it has a stack mixin, which is great for once you get down to your breakpoint, just to start grabbing elements, finding the selectors for them, and just applying stack to it. And it's like header has stack applied to it, nav, the nav element has stack applied to it, each one of these articles has stack applied to it. What it does is it sets like a width of 100% and then gives a little bit of margin bottom and centers everything, like text align centers everything. So the result is, you take your fluid website and then you pick a couple selectors, apply stack to them, and now you've got a nice mobile version. You can, if you don't want your text to be aligned center, you can pass a parameter to it of L to text align left, or R to text align right. And here's our breakpoint mixin. So basically anything in between BP and end BP will be a media query at 705 pixels. And like I said, we can change that to 500 pixels if you prefer. And just anything in here will be executed at 500 pixels. And that's the framework in a nutshell. The actual, all the mechanics to it. Then there's some goodies like typography, which Jeet has very, very simple typography. It doesn't have like all that crazy modular scale stuff, or the golden ratio, or any of that crazy math applied, because I started using those and started realizing I didn't like all the margin and padding and stuff applied to it, and I was always having to tweak it, and by then I was breaking all the math involved in it. So I decided just to make Jeet's typography like very dead simple, and then you can change it if you want. You can go in and change it either here or in your style file. I usually just change it in my style file, but there's some baseline typography to start off so it doesn't look horrible. And then also there's a goodies file where there's just a few goodies that you can use. There's a clear fix, which is Nicholas Gallagher's micro clear fix. There's a button, so you can get like you can get some pretty cool Bootstrap like buttons if you just say, okay, I want this button element to be a button. The first parameter is the background color, so we can change that to something like yellow, or we can give it like a hex value, or we can give it RGBA value, any color, is the first parameter. The second parameter is the radius, so we can say 0, and to get like a rectangular button, we can say 2 pixels. And the third parameter is the style. It defaults to flat, which is just the background gradient, and glossy looks glossy. It changes colors slightly if you hover over it, so it looks nice. And this is part of the reusability of using a preprocessor. You can add on to this as much as you want. You can keep adding styles onto it if you want. You can add whatever code you want, and anytime you want to change a button or add some style to a button, you don't just have like 5 or 6 buttons like in or like button colors like in Bootstrap or Foundation. You can use any color you want, any border radius, and it doesn't apply padding and things like that. So you would have to apply, like a padding of whatever you wanted, and that's it. Like those two lines create a beautiful button. There's a little shadow mix in. It's kind of goofy. I was just kind of toying around, but you can see if you can get it to work. And then Chrome Frame has some very basic styling done to it. If you want, you can come in here and change some of these colors just to match your design. And I believe that's pretty much it. So yeah, that's it for the framework. Now, to actually see Jeet in action, okay? So once we've got our web and design folder, we go into our web folder. We're editing index.html. We're editing style.style. Let's add some markup. Say header. Let's say div inside of that. Make an anchor with the classic logo. And just type logo in there. Okay. You see, like, it's okay to use classes. I don't like if they're naming an element or a block of stuff. I don't think it's okay to use presentational classes like grid, 10, things like that. But I'm all about using classes and IDs, so don't think I'm like a super HTML purist. Anyway, so we've got our header with div inside of it and a logo. So just to see how Jeet works, if we go over to our stylus, and we type in header, enter, and this is stylus. This is what's beautiful about stylus. You type in header, enter, tab over to get background, and then we'll just give it a light gray background. Now, if we open up our page, there's nothing there. Okay, there's the logo, but you can see like it doesn't even have typography styles applied to it. That's because we have to trigger stylus to start watching this file. Now whenever it watches this file, you'll see it'll compile a style.css file here. So to have it watch it, you can right click and copy the address of whatever folder you're in, type in cd in your terminal, and then paste that address in. Now type stylus use, or u, pass the u flag for use, library nib, and pass the w flag. Now hit enter, and it just created our style.css file. We go back to our page and refresh. Now we're getting the gray background and some typography. If we open up that style.css file, you can see all the stuff that was compiled, and it's not that much to start off with compared to almost every other CSS framework out there. It's minuscule. But if you want to make it even smaller, hit Control-C to terminate this batch job. Yes. Hit up a couple times. If we add a C flag on the end of that command, now it'll compile it, it'll compress it. So now if we click back over there, we've got a compressed version of our CSS that, all we had to run was stylus use nib, and where stylus is global and where nib is global, we can use this anywhere we want. We don't have to, install stylus every time or install nib every time. We just install it one time, and now we can use it anywhere we want, just like this. So this is the command that I use almost every single time I'm ever messing around with Jeet. Stylus u nib wc, and it gives me a compressed tiny, tiny, tiny files. Okay, so now we got our background color. Now, if we say we want to center this, we want to center our logo at that max width thing. If we just apply the center mix in and then refresh, it centers everything. It centers our header and everything. So what if we want the background to stretch 100% and just the logo, just the content area to be centered? This is kind of like a design pattern. This is a pattern that I found in Jeet. If we make our markup like this, where we've got our element that we want to assign the full width background to, and then immediately inside that have a div. We can say header div and then indent center. So now it'll apply the background, that light gray background, to header, and then the immediate div inside of that we can center. Now any other divs that are nested inside of that div won't be centered, but now we've got our centered div, we've got our centered content area. And that's just kind of a taste of what Jeet can do and how it works. And here in a second I'll show you everything else. Okay, so let's imagine that Tuts Plus has asked us to redesign their webdesign.tutsplus website. First, we'd open up our project folder. It's in our local host. Then we would open up the zip that we grabbed off of GitHub. Drag our design and web folders in there. I've already made a logo and a palette for it, so we'll drag those into our design folder. The design's so simple we didn't even need to use our web thing. So here's the new palette and the new logo. And we'll open up our web folder. Make sure you type in localhost there instead of the www stuff. And then we'll open this up in Sublime 2. Oops. Go into our CSS folder and open up style. And right click copy address, open up our terminal. Stylus use nib, watch, compress. Alright. So first thing we'll notice is they've got this top area, and that's where we'll put our logo and our search box. And then the next area will have navigation, and then we'll have post and a sidebar area. It's not going to be identical to this, but we're going to try to keep a lot of the same elements in the same place. So make a header and give it a header ID. I know that seems redundant, but a lot of times header is used inside of articles. So if you give it an ID of something specific like that, then you can use it like so. And we know that we want to have like these margins on the side, so we're going to want like to center content. So we'll do that little trick where we put a div inside of it. And then over here in our stylus, we'll say header, div, center. And we don't have anything in there yet, but it's centering that. Let's go ahead and give it some color, background color. Let's get this dark background. If you use Emmet, then you can just type in something like BG and then hit tab. There's a Sublime plugin for that. So now we're getting our background color. Now, we know there's a logo, some links, search, Let's leave out the links for now. Okay. So now we can either put our logo just like that, or if you think you might have another logo class somewhere in your file, you might want to nest it. So we'll go ahead and nest it just in case we have to use the logo like somewhere else, like down here or something. Yeah, there, like in the footer. So put our logo and give it a column, say about 4, no, we'll say 6. Okay, and let's copy that, paste it, create an image folder, save this logo PNG. All right, let's bump that off the top a little bit. And you can also, if you have Emmet, you can do something like this. MT15, margin top 15, and hit tab. So I want to do margin top 30. Okay, that looks good. And remember how we did, how we're loading placeholder.js so that we can just use placeholders? Okay, so the form that's nested in header, is columns 10. We'll offset it by 8. And then we'll say the input inside of it is 18 columns, and the button is 6. So what I'm doing here, whenever you nest, so we've got a column with 10 here, so you'd think that this would be like, 5 and 5. 5 plus 5 equals 10. But whenever you nest, it resets the columns to 24. So if we make it 18 and 6, that works. Okay, and that might be too big. Let's offset it a little bit more, or let's make this a little bit smaller. 7. I'll make it like 8. And then, okay, I'm pretty stupid. I'm gonna start using a calculator because 24 minus 6 for the logo, minus 8 for the form, leaves us with 10 offset. Okay, that looks pretty good. Margin top 30 again. And then you can add as much padding as you'd like. And let's go ahead and make that a button. So are you starting to see like how fast this is? Like, I just want it to look a certain way. And let's give that button some color. Let's make it this orange color. Okay. So let's see. And we've got some navigation there. This will be below the header. And again, I'm giving an idea of nav in the div inside, just so that we know exactly what nav we're talking about. And because I know I want this to be a full stripe, a full width stripe. And let's make it slightly a different shade of the blue. And center that div. Okay, let's put some stuff inside of it so that we this is the Emmet plugin again. Let's see, how many links do they have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so let's give our header a little bit of padding on the bottom of 30, same as we have on top. And then let's give our nav, well, let's give our nav items, the anchors, some padding. And we'll give them 15 padding. It's also, let's see, how many anchors do we have? 7. So this is the cool part too. If we say, we've got 24 columns and, 7 is not a factor of 24, but where it's percentage based, it doesn't care. So we can say 3.42. We can actually just copy that and paste that. And where we want these not to have a margin, we can give them a span. Text align center. Text decoration none. Make them white. Maybe we should do that thing where we give them a border. We can actually grab the background color, and with stylus you can do stuff like this. Lighten that background color 10%. So now I've got a border right of this background color. It's 10% lighter than this background color. That might be a little bit too bright. Make it 5%. And then we'll give it a border left. And we can darken. Try 10%. Okay. Now those are actually starting to kind of look like buttons. Now if you'll notice the light border isn't applied over here and the dark one's not applied over here, but we can go to the actual nav element, or the div that's centered, and we can give it a border left of this light color and a border right of the dark color. Now there's some space between it, but let's see what that is. That's from the max padding stuff. So what we can do is we can either say padding 0 to get rid of it, or we can specify the first parameter, which was the width, and then the max padding width. I'll just do padding 0 since it looks a little bit cleaner to me. Alright, so now we've got some buttons, and here's another thing about stylus. If you just say and hover, now we can add, we can make the background color. Change on hover. So pretty cool. Let's go ahead and add a post. Well, actually, this is going to be an entire, like this entire section that's centered. So we'll have to wrap it in something. We'll just wrap it in a center div. And the reason I'm giving it a center class is because in the framework that already has the center thing applied to it, so we don't have to do anything special to it. Like, we have to have a specific element for this. We can't just say, you know, div and expect that to work. So like, we have to give it some type of name. This is one of those reasons that I'm not against classes and IDs and stuff. And where it doesn't have like a full width background, we don't have to do like the whole div trick like right inside of it. So we'll just take our normal div here. Actually, you know what? We're going to give this its own background. So we'll say this is the main area. And over here, the post. And then we've got an aside. It's our sidebar. So real quick, just to visualize what's going on, we've got our main section, and I am going to center it, and I'm also going to give it a background of white. Oops. Go to height to 40 just so you can kind of see what's going on. Okay. You know what? I think I want. Yeah. And maybe I don't need to give it a background. Still want to keep the main thing because, you know, we could use that centering class in other places, and I want to be very specific about where this is. So, okay, sorry. So let's give our header a margin bottom of 30. Oops, I mean our nav a margin body of 30. Okay, so now this main div, so you can see, it's pushed off there. Okay, so our post div, and I'm not nesting this inside of main because, you know, it's an ID, so I can only have one area that's post as an ID of post. So let's give it a column of 16. Give our sidebar a column of 8. And let's start putting stuff in here so we can actually see what's going on. So we'll make a post. And let's see, we've got a thumbnail here, some the categories here, title, link, and meta. So say image, thumb, there it is. So let's see, how big are these? $150 by 150. We'll just go big with it. Okay, so Oh, it's because I'm not giving it a protocol, I bet. There it goes. Okay. So we've got our thumbnail there. And then this would work if we just put some content in here and then gave each one of these sections its own column. But if we put it in a div, then we just have to move that one div over. So say the category links are a navigation element. Then we've got our big header stuff, designer dare to experiment. And let's go ahead and put this meta information in here. And then that way, if at some point down the road we want to put excerpts in here, if you've come from WordPress, then we can do so underneath the header. This kind of looks like header stuff that's like clumped together there. Navigation should probably go in there as well. Okay, so yeah, sorry. A hard time copying and pasting. Okay. Pretty sure you know how to put links in there, so I'm not gonna turn those all into links, but you could if you wanted to. Oops. So there's kind of our post right there. And now let's go ahead and nest this under post, because we might have another post class somewhere along the way. So I'm going to be very specific about where this is. Give it a background of whites, border of 1 pixel solid, light gray. Okay, and they use a very light gray background here, so let's steal that. And we'll just say whole HTML document background of F2s. Okay. Let's go our post padding of 30. The image inside there, we know that there's only going to be one image inside of that, so we don't even need to give it a class. So column 8. And we'll say header. Column 16. Is that right? Am I doing the math right? 20. Yeah. 24 minus 8 is 16. Okay. So now you'll notice all these are lined up correctly, but we've got a clear fix issue. So remember that goodie CF clear fix. There we go. So now this seems a little bit too close right there. So what I'm going to do is offset the header by 1. There, that looks better. With a little slash between those. And post. I'm going to go ahead and nest this inside of header because there might be, like, if we do add an excerpt, we might have some other links that are created, like social links or something, that we'll need to use the nav element on again. Say nav anchors color and just give them a very light blue. Text decoration. We'll say on hover, there's a text decoration. Okay, it's looking pretty good. Alright, now if we just copy that post a couple times, save it. Oh, we're getting double borders, so we can do, say, border bottom 0, and then on the very last one, if we push the whole post container off the bottom here. Actually, we'll push the main container off the bottom, so we don't have to do it for both the sidebar and the post. So now if we say go back to where it'll be immediately nested underneath the post, we say and last child border bottom 1 pixel solid DDD. Now we've got our border back. So let's make we'll just do a couple of these things. We'll make the social links and maybe the freelance job thing. Actually, we'll just do the social links because it's going to get long. I'm sure you guys are bored. Okay, so like nav. And since it's a sidebar, there's probably going to be all kinds of nav elements. So we'll call these social, class of social, Twitter, Facebook, Google. Okay. And then now remember this resetted, so those would be 8 columns. And where we want them to be side by side, give them a span of 8. And text lines, center them. Oops. Oh, it's because the nav element itself doesn't have columns 8. Oops. Wait, yeah, it does. Class social. Oh, okay. So the sidebar itself has column 8, and then I was trying to make the social, the whole nav area be column 8. Whenever I should have been trying to make, I should have left the nav element, which was the social class, and then all the links inside of it be column 8. There we go. And again, span 8, sorry. And text align center, text decoration, none, font weight bold. Alright, and give me some background. Padding 30, border, solid, DDD. Again, border right 0, and last child, border right 1 pixel solid, DDD. There we go. So now we've got, and something we can do, instead of setting just the navigation link color to this, we can delete that, go into our framework, go into our settings, and change the link color right there. And that'll change all of these link colors, so we don't have to change them individually every time. Alright, so that's kind of a redesign, kind of showing you how to use Jeet. Now, if we take this and start shrinking it, looks pretty good. It's pretty responsive. And then you'll see that the links start getting hidden. One of the reasons for that is over here we've got padding of 30. So it's applying padding 30 to top and bottom, but also left and right. We don't need to do it for left and right where it's text align center. So we can do that, and then we get back some of our space. And then right there, Tuts Premium kicks down to the next line. So maybe right there we could set a breakpoint, and we'll just test to make sure our breakpoint's being triggered by setting the HTML background to red. Okay, so whenever it kicks down the next line, it's somewhere around, if we click on HTML, somewhere around 875 pixels. So whenever it gets down about that far, we'll do our breakpoint, and then that'll start stacking stuff, and then that way we don't have to worry about this kicking down to the next line and causing the borders to look funny. And that's one of the cool things about being able to add these breakpoints in wherever you want. Just anytime something starts to look funny, add a breakpoint, fix it. And it's the fastest way I found to do it. So another thing, another tip is, oh, and you see, like, it looks like there's some padding on those as well, so we might be able to fix that. Make that even a little bit better. Yeah. So now if we look at it, it's about 745, which is close to the original 705 pixels, which was picked, I think, for iPad. But okay, so now at 745 it changes. Give yourself like a little bit of room to work with, because fonts are displayed differently in different sizes and stuff for different browsers and different systems. So give yourself, like, you know, between 5 and 10 extra pixels width. So even if we could get by with 740 or 735, and give yourself like about 10 pixels extra width, just so that you don't have to worry about different browsers messing it up. So now once it gets down to this size, let's just go ahead and stack everything. Oh, and I noticed the search button's messed up too. So if we go to our header, form, button, padding 10, and just give it 0 on each side. It's still text align center, so I mean, it's not gonna break anything. Okay, so now let's just start stacking stuff. First thing we should stack will be the logo, which is nested under header. So we say header, logo, stack. And the reason it's not centering is because the image inside of it is displayed block. But if we make it display inline or inline block, then it's fine. So we'll say header, logo, image, display inline block. Okay, and then for our form, that's header form. Here's what I like to do, is just go through and copy the selectors. And even on mobile, that looks pretty good like that. Maybe we'll add another breakpoint that'll kick that search button below it. Okay, so now these are nav anchors. And we just keep on appending these as we go. And again, this is one of the cool parts about it being flexible, is that we can like, this is one of the cool parts about everything not being set in stone and actually being flexible, is that, now we can set our borders very easily. Say border top, border bottom. And I don't want those spaced out like that, so margin bottom 0, since that stack thing applies to margin bottom of 2%. And there we go. Now we've got our navigation all stacked up. So I'd like to stack these areas right here. So let's see, stack main, stack sidebar. Okay, sidebar looks pretty good like that. Yeah, we'll probably leave sidebar just like that. But main also has some post inside of it. You know what, I don't even think we need to stack main where it was centered. We can just stack posts. And we'll stack post image. Post header. And then we can give the image a little bit of margin on the bottom. And we can take away that margin on the bottom of post header p tags. And get rid of the ugly red background. Okay, and just like that, we've redesigned Web Design Tuts Plus to be completely responsive and to look cool doing it. And let's see how big our code ended up being. In 7,800 characters, we've got a completely responsive site. And it took this much stylus. Like we had to write 1,700 and 350. So we had to write about 2,000 lines of stylus. And then just very clean markup. And that's Jeet, man. Pretty cool. Alright, I hope it wasn't too long and you learned a lot about the Jeet framework and start using it. Thanks, guys.